this whole case, the Gonzalez v. Google. So the Supreme Court's hearing this case where, so the purpose of the lawsuits, they want to strip Google from their protections from civil liability for third-party content under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. So Reynaldo Gonzalez, he is the guy he's the plaintiff in this case. There are a couple of really good write-ups on the background of the case. His daughter was killed in 2015, and he was saying that because it was a terror attack, he is arguing that Google is your YouTube is a subsidiary of Google, and that he's arguing that the terrorist was posting content on YouTube that was, that he was saying aided the Islamic State. And so the case is asking whether or not Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act is applicable to the content that comes up in the recommended section from YouTube's algorithms. Now, Google's defending itself. The Gonzalez, his team is arguing that the recommended algorithms, you see that, like recommended video, all that stuff. They said to some degree, they said that their recommendation algorithms make YouTube a publisher of third-party content to some degree. And they say, well, we're unprotected by 230. And that's what Gonzalez is saying, that they're unprotected by 230 because it's not like it's a third party thing. It's a third party, the algorithm that's doing all of this, the recommended algorithms to an extent is like publishing third party content. So they're saying that it doesn't apply to that, so they need to be held liable. So it's, in some ways, it's like a review, a kind of like a appetizer on any kind of move on 230. And in some ways, it's a little bit more limited. But because without 230, so you wouldn't be able to post anything hardly anywhere. That's the thing. I think this comes back to, this is what happens when you lack a clarity on Section 230 with all of this. When you have no clarity and you are, when you really you should treat, especially these algorithms designed like this to promote certain content, it should be treated as editorialization. There was a really good piece, and I'll put this in your prep email. Kane had shared this in Slack. It's on Twitter. It's a long thread to kind of break down some of these arguments for and against on each side on 230. And kind of, because it gets into the weeds a little bit when you look at what's recommended in third party, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things that they noted is they're saying that, they're talking about civil liability says explicitly providers or users shall be immune from civil liability or voluntarily filtering or blocking objectionable content so long as they did so in good faith. Now, to understand Section 230 really quickly, so you understand this good faith argument, this goes back to that. You guys remember The Wolf of Wall Street, right? That whole movie that was based on a real thing. Okay, so that firm that was involved in all of that, back in the early days of the Webernets, when you had different ISPs that had their whole different systems, you would have message boards, like a giant Reddit for all these different things. And so the ISP in this particular instance, there was like a message board that they had, and it dealt with finance, and someone was accusing the firm that was in The Wolf of Wall Street of, basically it was accurate, but at the time they were arguing against them. And one of the guys that worked in that firm had sued, said it was defamatory, etc. And they wanted to provide the case. Ultimately, it sided on, with the ISP. They were saying you can't hold a platform, and platform is not what's used in 230, but you cannot hold an entity responsible for what people are posting, like in their comments, message boards, things like that, especially if any kind of moderation is done in good faith. And so, ultimately it's like looking at Yelp. Yelp is a service. You can't hold Yelp accountable for the comments or reviews or stuff that people post on Yelp. Yelp can make a good faith effort to moderate, but beyond that, they're very, very careful so as to not limit speech online. And I think it's actually a wise move, because without the protection of Section 230, then it's constrained for everyone and everybody can be sued for every damn thing. And, I could be sued for comments on my website. We would have to end the YouTube chat. I mean, I'd have to end all commentary on my newsletter. I mean, because then you could be held liable for everything that somebody else posted. And that's, it's goofy, but that's what that case back then determined. So what they're talking about with this is that, providers or users, they're setting out how that section is differentiated. You're immune from civil liability if you're, blocking things that are objectionable, like legally objectionable, like like child anything like horrible like that. And they said, the point of 230 is to protect people who are trying to moderate content, but, because they're doing everything in good faith. And at some point you can't get to everything. That's just the nature of, now social media. But so what they're saying is that YouTube's use of personal data, they're using personal data to recommend videos. And so the third party comes in with using the personal data stuff. They said, they're using your personal data to serve up videos that you're likely to click on and share. And the recommendation algorithms, they said, are trade secrets. And that, they're using your personal data and apparently working with another third party to use that, have some analysis and then throw that out in the algorithms. And so that's why they say that makes it exempt from 230. It's a very interesting argument, because I kind of wonder, how many other of these platforms rely on, work with another entity when they're going through personal data to go through recommendations for things. It makes you wonder. And I would imagine, a lot of, that would be applicable to so many things. And I agree with Kane. Kane's like, well, I don't know why we just can't adhere to existing laws of speech on libel. And I agree with that, with libel and defamation. The thing with 230, though, is that they're separating the people who are posting the comment from the thing on which they're posting the comment. Because now, and I do agree with this, up until that point, there hadn't been, because technology will require clarification of law, but natural rights are not anachronistic. So it doesn't matter the medium through which speech happens, free speech is still free speech. But what they were also saying is that you cannot hold another entity responsible for someone else's comments, especially if they don't even merit. In a lot of instances, if they don't even merit, actionable, unprotected speech. So you can't go out and sue Yelp because you don't like somebody's review, or you can't go out and sue a website because you don't like what a commenter said, or something like that. Or even if it does go up to something that's unprotected. So and especially it's that good faith clause, or that good faith inclusion. So it still is judicial policymaking. And I agree with what one analysis says. They said it's judicial policymaking like turn of 20th century judges not wanting to impose tort liability on early industry for fear of curtailing growth. Now, that's what some justices think. Kavanaugh, they said, seems afraid to rule because it undermines those models like that. And they said others like Kagan think that it's an institutional competence question, that Congress should be changing overbroad judicial interpretations of 230. So there's it's a fascinating discussion, but I do err always on the side of caution with this stuff. So it just needs a clarification with editorialization and algorithms for tech. That's it.